So this dog coat looks like it fits pretty well, but it doesn't. The problem with this coat is that it's too tight, and in the front end it doesn't actually fit the proportions of the dog, and it actually all starts moving forward. And the key message here is that when a lot of dog makers are making the dog coat, what happens is they're not measuring some of these key areas, and they're not measuring them with enough ease to understand how measurements need to also account for the movement of the dog. So I'm just going to go back to the photos here and show you. Let's take a little bit closer look at this dog coat while the dog is in motion. You can see that there's a lot of stress areas that are going on here. The dog coat is shifting. Everything is shifting to one side. So I can show you here. If I highlight this area here, you can see that the dog coat is bunching up. What's happened is the whole coat, while this dog is walking, is shifting to one side instead of just hanging nicely along the side there. There's also another indication here. Underneath the front legs, in behind the front legs here, you can start to see that see these wrinkles in here. If I zoom in a little bit more, you can start to see that there's some real wrinkles in here. It's pulling in and starting to rub up against behind the dog's legs and underneath their armpits. And lastly, if I zoom in a little bit closer here too, you can start to see that there's some wrinkles that are going on here. And that also is a real strong indication that there is some problems that are going on with this coat. And what's happening when the dog starts moving in the coat, if there is some area of the coat that doesn't quite fit properly, what happens is that everything will move towards that stressed area. And if the balance of that fit and the fit measurements, dimensions aren't quite right, what'll happen is that the back of the coat will start twisting side to side. And that's what happened when we looked at this picture here. If I go back a couple and highlight that one, that's what's happening here, is that coat is twisting, and it's twisting to one side and it'll twist to the other side. And that's because the balance isn't quite right on this. So I just wanted to show you, I'm going to go to the overhead projector here so that I can show you on the stuffed dog on how to measure your dog and some of these key measurements that you want to make sure that you check and make sure that you've got right. And also make sure that you're accounting for some extra ease in these measurements so that you are allowing for the natural movement of a dog. So let's move to the overhead projector here. And I'm going to go to show you how I'm going to measure this dog. So this is my good old trusty stuffed animal here. And I want to show you some of the key measurements. First key measurement is the neck to withers. So the neck area you measure typically for where a collar would sit. If a dog doesn't wear a collar, you're looking for where that dip is between the head and where the neck is, or sorry, where the spine is. So typically where a collar would sit would be right about here where my finger is. And then you're looking for the withers position on the dog. And the withers position from the dog you can find by drawing an imaginary line up from behind the front legs straight up to their spine. And this point on the spine is actually where the shoulders are on a dog. That's the shoulder bone position. And that helps everything rotate. When they're moving their legs front and back, that is where their shoulders are, and that's where all the pivot action is. So this is a really critical measurement in order to determine where that belly band portion of the dog coat sits. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your measuring tape and start it to where the collar would normally sit on the dog, and then run down the spine to where that imaginary line is up from behind the front legs. And that's your neck to withers measurement. That's a really critical measurement. The other measurement that could really come into play here is on the front of the dog. So one of the other ones that I'll first look at is called the chest width. And that is this measurement that goes across the front of the chest just below the neck. And it's from side to side on the widest point of those front legs. So you're going to take your measurement and you're going to run across the front legs to both sides of those outside bones of the dog's front legs. So you just run across there and then write that measurement down. And the last one that I want to show you is called the front height. And that is another really critical measurement. And that is you take from where the collar sits, again on the dog, and you run it through those front legs to the widest point on the dog's chest. So you'd run that down there, and wherever the widest point is on the chest, that's where you'd take that measurement. But the key that I want to say here, one of the most important messages for all of these different measurements, is that you really want to be taking into account the idea of ease of movement. So one of the things that, if you've watched my video, I always say take the measurements with your dog in a standing position. And what I mean is you're not trying to take your dog while the dog is sitting or whether they're twisting and all that. You want to have their spine straight. That's the most critical thing. But you also need to add in some of that extra space for movement that the dog's going to do. Now, clearly you can't be measuring your dog while they're running around and playing, but what you can do is add some extra space in. So in the videos, if you've watched the videos that I do, I say take your dog's measurements while they're standing, but add in a couple of extra fingers. So that's one way to add in a little extra ease. Is you put your fingers down underneath that underneath that measuring tape while you're measuring, and that gives you a little bit of extra space while you're measuring so that you know you've got enough movement there. You do that when you're doing the chest circumference, and you also do that while you're doing the neck circumference. So I always suggest put a couple fingers underneath that measuring tape just to get a little bit of extra space there. But the critical thing that I really want to also point out here is that when you're measuring this point, this front height point, or even when you're measuring this neck to withers point, you want to take that measurement and add in a little bit of extra ease into that. You don't want to have that as just a critical stop point. This gives you the idea of where that shifting happens. That neck to withers shows you where those legs are going to move, and that gives you an indication of where you want to have some extra space in there. And also it just gives you an idea of where the stress points are on the dog coat itself. So if you imagine that this dog coat is sitting on the dog, and let's take a look at the coat itself that I've got in the pictures here. So this dog coat, this is the same coat that's in the photographs that I just showed you. And this portion here is what wraps around the dog's front legs. And it comes and it does up here on the side of the dog. So this area here is where all the movement happens. This is the section, this kind of triangle here is where all the movement happens on the dog. And what happens is that the back end, if there's not enough balance between the front and the back end on the dog coat, what happens is that the back end will start shifting around. And the balance comes from both the length of the coat, so where this portion here sits within that balance of the coat, but it also depends on the balance of that tightness compared to the looseness. So again, if we go back to the photographs of the dog itself in this coat, you can see, let's go to the other one. If we go back to this photograph here, you can see that this portion right here is where this wrap is that I was talking about, that's wrapping around the dog's legs. And there's actually a lot of extra room. If you go from that wrapped point where the coat is wrapping on the dog's body to the back of the coat, there's actually quite a lot of extra space here. Now, this is my dog Scout, and she's part poodle. So the poodle part of her means that she's got a really long back. This is part of her features. It's very, very long. So when I make dog coats for her, I like to make this panel, this part that wraps around the belly, I like to make it deeper so that I can cover more of her belly. So if I come back to this coat here on the table, if I make this longer, this is a different coat than the one that is actually on scope, but it's the same idea. You can see that this portion down here is quite a bit longer on the dog coat. So I would want to make this section here longer so that it covers more of the belly on the coat or belly on the dog, and also just shifts that this triangle area, it shifts that whole balance so that it comes a little bit further down the dog coat. What I'd like to do now is just show you on the pattern itself where you would make these changes. So this is the chest portion, this is that wrap portion, and this is the body portion of the dog coat. And what you're trying to do here is, well, let me just show you how these relate to the dog coat itself. So let's get this in the right position. So this portion here matches up with this portion of the pattern. That's your chest piece. This portion here matches up with this portion of the pattern. And then this portion here is the body. Now, of course, as you can see, this pattern is much smaller than the dog coat itself. But if I took those three pieces and then I positioned them against or put them up together, line them all up together, this portion here, of the chest, attaches to that back part of the body. And then these two pieces sew together and they wrap around the dog's body so that it fits the dog, and it goes around their front legs. Their front legs sit right here. So as I said, this portion right here, this kind of triangle, that is your major fitting area. And you really want to just kind of imagine how that dog is going to be moving in this coat and make sure that you add a little extra. So when I looked at that front height measurement, when I took the measurement from the neck and ran it down here, that is this portion. This is where the neck sits on the dog. Again, this would be sewn here. So this is where the head would stay or poke out of the dog coat right here. And then this portion here is, if I had these two pieces together, that is the front height of the dog. So if I had a really long dog coat and this portion went a lot further down, I would be making this portion here much wider so that it covered more of this coat area. And that really helps to balance out the whole triangle that I pointed out and the whole balance of the overall coat itself. So I would be changing this length here from here to here, and I would lengthen that if I needed to. That's where you would change the front height, is in here, in these two pieces. And then the neck to withers point, this is here where the coat folds down. And that part is just sort of a little hood area. So again, if we look at the coat here, this is where it folds down. And so the neck measurement starts right about here, and that's right about there. So that neck to withers point is measured along this back side here. And that part there would be determining where this part here will sit on the dog coat. So I just wanted to point those out. So when you're looking at those measurements that are sitting on the dog itself, how they relate to the pattern itself. And again, that critical message that I want to point out here is that this area here, this triangle point, is all the critical measurements of, or the critical areas that you really want to be measuring and also accounting for the movement of the dog. So again, if we had the dog coat and it looks fantastic, and then you start to see the dog move and you see all these stress points, that's when you know that you haven't quite got the dog coat fit right. But as I showed you in the overhead presentation there's a lot that you can do when you're in the measuring point of your process of making your dog coats to make sure that you get those measurements right. Make sure you build in some extra space for some movement so you're not just measuring the dog and making that the exact size of the coat itself. That is just really the critical message here. If you have any questions on this particular dog coat that I've shown you, or if you're working with a different pattern all of your own and you're not quite sure, it doesn't feel like it fits right, you can see where there's some problems, or you've noticed that coat that's twisting back and forth, that is the real key message. That's the real key problem, and I would love to hear about it. I'd be happy to help you troubleshoot where those problems might be starting in your coat. But just remember that everything in, let's go back to this photo here, everything in this picture here, everything in the coat, as the dog moves, you can see their front leg is moving forward. That's pulling that whole coat forward. And if the balance isn't right in this triangle section, that's when you're going to have problems with the coat shifting over and twisting to one side, or it may ride up on your dog, or it may bunch up underneath these leg areas here. So that's the key message. If you have any questions about this, please do add a comment down below, or I've also added my email down in the description below. So feel free to email me directly. And if you've got photographs of problems that you're dealing with, send those along as well. As I often say, if you've got a problem with a fit, more than likely other people are having the same problem themselves. So I always love to have real live examples that I can show people where people are struggling with the fit of their dog. I hope this helps you. Any questions, make sure you leave them down below. Please do like and follow me, and I will continue to add these videos every week, every Thursday at 11 a.m. All right, see you next week.